Young Frankenstein, Mel Brooks' masterwork in black and white, is full of mishaps, blunders, and spontaneous improvisations that somehow made it funnier. From phrases that made the actors giggle uncontrollably to items that vanish for no apparent reason, the errors became a part of the magic. I want to smell your breath. Decades later, one unedited photograph taken in the midst of complete mayhem still piques interest. Do you want to see how these mishaps became treasure? Let's explore 20 hilarious blunders from this timeless comedy. In the now famous bag scene, young Frankenstein made one of his funniest and most memorable gaffes. Dr. Frederick Frankenstein asks Igor for assistance with the luggage when he, Gene Wilder, and his staff arrive at the castle. Marty Feldman, who played Igor, chose to include a cheeky, spontaneous phrase because the script called for a direct response. "The one in the turban will be mine, and you'll have the blonde." Neither the staff nor the actors were prepared for it. Terry Garr nearly burst out laughing as her character, Inga, watched Wilder try to keep his cool. This sequence was repeatedly videotaped by the crew, but Feldman kept slipping the line in. And he presented it a little bit differently every time. The crowd would erupt in laughter, since it was made much more fun by Wilder's attempts to contain his laughter. Mel Brooks loved it so much that he kept the blooper, making it one of the most referenced scenes in the entire movie. The straightforward opening sequence became one of the most talked about comedy highlights. Not bad. That was pure improv talent captured on film for all time. When you believe that the laughter will never stop, the following blooper shows you how mistaken you were. 19th. The bulge that persisted in motion. Large eyes, a crooked smile, and, of course, his enigmatic hump are what most remember about Marty Feldman's Igor. The kicker is this, though. The script didn't really include the hump humor. To check if anyone on the set would notice, Feldman chose to relocate Igor's hump from one shoulder to the other during early filming. Though first silent, Gene Wilder soon realized and was unable to maintain composure. During the production, Feldman would playfully move the hump every time the camera rolled, turning the farce into a continuous practical joke. The hump joke continued to exist as one of the most subdued yet hysterical aspects of the movie until Mel Brooks finally realized that Feldman was playing the role and agreed to it. Because of Feldman's spontaneous improvisation, audiences often assume that this is the outcome of a well-written humor. His light-hearted mockery resulted in one of the most enduring sight gags for Little Frankenstein. Another example of how the most hilarious moments are those that are entirely original. Thanks to Feldman's strange genius, the moving hump went from being a blooper to becoming an integral part of the movie's legacy. Figure 18, the candlestick error. The use of a basic candlestick is among the most endearing blunders that audiences have overlooked. A light is carried by Dr. Frankenstein and Inga as they navigate the castle's hidden tunnels in the movie. A pastiche of vintage horror films was intended to heighten the suspense, but viewers with keen eyes will spot something odd. The candlestick abruptly disappears in between shots. It is firmly in hand and lighting their path in one frame. It's gone the next instant, like if it vanished into thin air. This was a pure continuity disaster in the making, not a planned one. Due to the rapid pace of the production, props occasionally got lost in the chaos of numerous takes. Perhaps Mel Brooks chose not to alter it in favor of unnecessary reshoots, believing that doing so would not significantly detract from the atmosphere. In fact, though, it makes the scene funnier. It appears to be the same editing error that would be too evident in a full-length horror film, the same genre that Young Frankenstein parodied. When fans point out this candlestick error, they frequently claim that it blends in well with the parody style and appears to be deliberate. Regardless of your perspective, whether you consider it a mistake or a witty jab at bad filmmaking, it's one of those small elements that demonstrate how even errors can add charm to a film. 17th. One of the most referenced scenes in Young Frankenstein is Wilder broke character during sedative, which also contains a hilarious blooper that was included in the final edit. According to the script, Igor is to give the monster a tranquilizer at Dr. Frankenstein's order. When the cameras started rolling, however, Marty Feldman contorted the statement into his now famous delivery. Digestive? It wasn't intended to sound so odd. It was Feldman's spontaneous improvisation from the script. Gene Wilder simply wasn't prepared. Sedative? Feldman yelled that out. eyes wide. There was a smile on Wilder's face that he was trying very hard to hide. He's supposed to be all serious and intense, but with that dash of insanity, you can see him barely suppressing his giggle. Mel Brooks has an affinity for spliced, uncut, and natural. He said the scene was made much more memorable by the spontaneous event. For years, fans have been perplexed by whether or not Cedar's line was scripted. According to the cast, however, he was Feldman in his purest form. One of the most beloved lines in the entire film began as a genuine off-camera blooper. It's the ideal illustration of how Wilder and Feldman's chemistry transformed mishaps into comic gold, providing viewers with a timeless and unvarnished moment of humor. 16th. The slip of Inga in the hay. One of the cheekiest scenes in Young Frankenstein is the roll in the hay scene, which also conceals a minor yet amusing gaffe. Terry Garr was expected to bounce around enthusiastically in a hay wagon while delivering her lines as the endearing and eccentric Inga. Although the comedy was intended to highlight her innocent playfulness, the scene wasn't as seamless to film as it appeared on television. In one attempt to balance on the hay, she slipped a little. Despite the fact that it wasn't a fall, her timing was off. Garr did a fantastic job improvising beyond her lines, adding the tumble to the action as if it were part of the set performance, rather than abandoning her character. Her ability to transform a ruin take into something hilarious and organic caused the crew members to hold back their laughter. Mel Brooks felt that the error enhanced authenticity, so he decided to keep it in. It brought that element of eccentricity to the entire film and captured Garr's charmingly awkward fall, which made Inga even more adorable. The film's overall attractiveness was enhanced when an ordinary outtake took a surprising turn and turned into one of those silent, joyful flukes. Number 15. The Puttin' on the Ritz chaotic few Young Frankenstein sequences are as memorable as the musical number. Despite Mel Brooks's initial opinion that it was too ridiculous, Gene Wilder worked hard to keep it in the script. Wilder believed that the comedy would become famous due to the ridiculousness of Frankenstein and his monster doing a Broadway routine while wearing tuxedos, and he was correct. However, the process of recording that scene was a complete mess behind the scenes. Peter Boyle had trouble with time as the monster during the performance. He either completely missed his cue in a number of takes or mangled the sentence in an overly dramatic snarl. The result was that the actors and staff would burst out laughing. As Wilder listened to this man yell the word Ritz in a loud, off-key manner, he could barely keep his face straight. The unending laughter caused the shooting to go on considerably longer than expected. However, Brooks eventually accepted the disorder. From a nearly unoriginal concept, it evolved into one of the pivotal moments in comic history. It's even more hilarious because it would spoil multiple takes with sincere laughter. In addition to being a classic, Putting on the Ritz is a perfect example of how Young Frankenstein's genius was fueled by fantastic disarray. 14th. It was the door that refused to close. It appeared to be an easy setup at first glance. Closing the thick wooden door behind him, Dr. Frankenstein enters the laboratory and proceeds with his lines. That enormous door on the set, however, had a mind of its own. The crew attempted a perfect staging of the scene in a single take. The hinges, however, jammed midway when Wilder tried to close it. Because the door would not budge, the result was an awkward pause. Despite fulfilling every requirement for the epitome of professionalism, Wilder remained true to himself. Rather, the stumble facilitated the raucous portion of his performance, as Wilder seemed to be extremely frustrated by the circumstances. Wilder's natural tendency to crumble in the face of mistake just made the scene funnier. Even the background seems to be working against him at this point. Mel Brooks was to discover that he rather enjoyed these snafus since it brought the entire set a variety of unique energies, and the crew was unable to contain their laughing. Brooks decided to keep the unsuccessful attempt at footsteps. The majority of haphazard mishaps that were preserved added to the humorous appeal of youthful Frankenstein. Laughter was never limited to the performers. The soundstage was also deeply involved in a conspiracy to explore every possible avenue for gold. 13. The phrase "follow me please" breaks. One of Marty Feldman's most hilarious unplanned moments occurred during a scene that was supposed to be taken seriously. Igor was unexpected in the best manner possible. In a rather professional tone, Igor abruptly says, "Follow me, please," as Dr. Frankenstein introduces his helpers and gets ready to take them through the castle. The way Feldman delivered the phrase, with an exaggerated bow and comic flair, caught everyone off guard because it wasn't in the script. The flickering twitch of Gene Wilder's lips told the other story just as he was trying to contain it. This moment could very well spill over into its own left side of lunacy, which is exactly why it is so funny. Gene Wilder worked very hard to maintain the calm dignity of Frederick Frankenstein. Love, fatty. Rather than shouting, Mel Brooks decided to roll the camera because he was so happy with how Feldman's playfulness flowed naturally with the action. Observant fans can detect Wilder's own erratic eye movements, which seem to be an attempt to maintain his own poise. He was forcing himself to contain his laughing at that moment. Young Frankenstein was unique because of these moments, the bloopers that did make it into the final edit, and those sweet little tidbits that were later created in an impromptu, brilliant way. Feldman wasn't merely being unpredictable for laughs. It created a spontaneous and lively humor while keeping everyone else on their toes. 12. The sound effect of the horse. A recurring joke in Young Frankenstein is the frightful response of horses whenever Frau Blücher's name is uttered. In the most ridiculous way, the abrupt, piercing neighs send shivers down people's spines. Most people are unaware, however, that this gag originated from a blooper. Before anyone had uttered her name, the sound department unintentionally set off the horse effect during one take. As soon as the cast started laughing, Wilder almost wrecked the shot by doubling over. Mel Brooks went a step further than just brushing the error aside. When Blücher's name was mentioned in later sequences, he ordered the sound technicians to extend the comedy by making the horses neigh longer and louder. One of the most well-known recurring jokes in the movie developed from a straightforward timing mistake. Fans continue to argue over whether the joke has a deeper meaning. The horse's dread may be explained by the fact that Blücher sounds like the German word for glue. Although Brooks liked the conjecture, he never verified this. The fact that this unintentional horse cue became a significant aspect of the movie's comic book, however, is undeniable. Creating a memorable comic device out of what was really a blunder. 11. The question of light speed. The most hilarious bloopers are occasionally instances where an actor unexpectedly inserts a remark, rather than actual mishaps. In one scene, Elizabeth poses a rather thought-provoking query to Frederick. What is the exact speed of light? The cue was oddly timed in the first place. However, it got much hilarious when Wilder, who was already on the verge of laughing because of Feldman's antics, attempted to respond in a serious and scientific manner. Marty Feldman decided to leave the scene after Wilder recited the line, 186,000 miles per second, turning what could have been a very careful response into a wild mayhem by beginning to toss props backstage and clown around. The expression on Wilder's face conveyed his ire at having to maintain his persona, while Feldman nearly ruined the scene. Brooks felt this sentence, along with Wilder's pause and half-smirk, felt so real that it was maintained. Rather than a flawless presentation, the audience was offered a glimpse of a character that was, in fact, on the verge of being serious and humorous. The mix that gave young Frankenstein its unique character. Although this strange physics issue in the middle of the bloop scene might not seem appropriate for a horror spoof, it was ideal at the time. The next slip will make you smile even more, I promise. That was hilarious. 10th. Peter Boyle lost his wig. Bringing the monster to life in Young Frankenstein required more than just growls and grunts. Intricate makeup and a precisely tailored headgear were also necessary. With prosthetics attached to his face and a heavy wig that finished the flat-topped appearance of the iconic Frankenstein monster, Peter Boyle spent hours in the makeup chair. Even the best-laid plans can occasionally go horribly wrong. The powerful hot-set lighting caused Boyle's wig to start slipping away during the highly dynamic operating table sequence, as Frederick and his team worked miracles to bring the monster to life. It was a gradual angle at first, modest enough that the crew missed it. In the middle of the clip, however, Wilder and Terry Garr caught a glimpse of it and had to fight back a laugh as the terrifying creature approached a fallen Halloween mask. For the audience of that particular scenario, Boyle, who is always a pro, resumed his customary deadpan groans without interrupting the action. Mel Brooks, who was behind the camera, declared it to be so precious that he would not even attempt to fix it in editing. As is customary, this simply winked the wig in an obnoxious manner at the frighteningly humorous tone of the movie. Number 9. The Unplanned Howl. It was Marty Feldman's talent to transform mundane phrases into surprising pandemonium. And his howl, which was entirely unscripted, was one of his greatest on-set surprises. Feldman abruptly threw back his head and gave a long, accentuated wolf howl during a moment that was meant to be spooky intense. It had been unexpected. It wasn't Terry Garr or Gene Wilder. As well as Mel Brooks. The wail was what relieved the tension in the room. As Dr. Frankenstein, Wilder struggled to maintain a straight face. Before long, it overcame him. Garr simply erupted in laughter. Behind the monster mask, Peter Boyle was also unable to maintain a straight expression. The take had to be res-hot since the crew laughed so loudly, but Brooks was too enamored with it. Feldman should continue whenever he felt like it, he advised. The howl eased the strain immediately. Though included here as one, not all of his howls managed to make it through the final mix. Most fans assume it was staged, but they won't realize that their favorite Feldman was indeed the target of this prank. Within the turbulent surface of young Frankenstein's humor, the spontaneous howl quickly discovered a tiny but unforgettable piece that proved that the most hilarious scares are frequently those that catch the audience off guard. Elizabeth lost her wig at number 8. By the time she played Elizabeth in Young Frankenstein, Madeline Kahn was already a comedic legend. Her role was intended to be extravagant, dramatic, glitzy, and usually a bit too much. Her intricate hairpieces, which were meticulously styled to reflect the exaggerated 1930s aesthetic, contributed to that look. Hollywood wigs, however, can occasionally have their own will. Kahn's wig started to come off during one of Elizabeth's brilliantly melodramatic lines as the action was taking place. At first, its movement was not particularly dramatic, it was merely tilting slightly off-center, which could have ruined the photo. In order to make it appear more like Elizabeth's charm and vanity than a botched wig perm, Kahn went against the grain and emphasized every facial expression and movement. The actors struggled to maintain a straight face, and Wilder apparently had to turn aside to contain his laughter. Always a supporter of preserving the film's inherent anarchy, Brooks thought the take was too humorous to ignore. By incorporating this event into her performance, Kahn turned it from a wardrobe disaster into pure comedy gold. Her character was made even more unforgettable by the hair slip, which was sufficient evidence that everything she did was spectacular. 7. The coffee cup error of continuity. For blooper hunters, continuity problems are the mainstay. And the enigmatic coffee cup is one that young Frankenstein's admirers still like pointing out. In one of the scenes, Dr. Frankenstein is talking, seeming calm and collected as he holds a cup. What's the issue? In between clips, the cup appears and disappears in entirely different hands, sometimes in the right hand, sometimes in the left, and sometimes not at all. In order to cover such slips during production, one would typically shoot another take. Nevertheless, Young Frankenstein was produced so quickly and with so many hours of improvisation that numerous minor continuity errors went unnoticed. They didn't feel like errors, rather, they blended in well with the film's general parody tone, the very tactlessness they were criticizing. Jump cuts and mismatched props were common in 1930s horror films, and the film's tackiness is a parody of those horror classics. There were rumors that Mel Brooks thought the editing room error was funny and didn't think it was worth removing. What was the outcome? It turns out that one of the movie's secret Easter eggs was the coffee cup that didn't disappear. An almost chaotically overt error that was charming and perfectly suited to the exaggerated comic world. Number 6. The Monsters dinner scene blooper. Peter Boyle's menacing yet strangely empathetic bearing was intended to be emphasized in the Monsters dinner scene. Seated at the table, dressed in his formal attire, the monster was supposed to exude both respect and embarrassment. It is inevitable for chaos to occur when you are surrounded by delicate props, strapped into an uncomfortable costume, and heavily make-upped. After getting up from the dinner table in a single take, Boyle recklessly knocks over a prop. The scene nearly collapsed due to the sudden and deafening sound. But Gene Wilder was not going to be denied that opportunity. Staying true to his role as Dr. Frankenstein, he came up with a joke about the monster's clumsiness being intentional. Because of the impeccable timing, the spontaneous moment blended in well with the performance. As the situation turned into a hilarious comedy, the crew let out an internal howl. Mel Brooks was enamored with it and chose to save the recording as it so accurately captured the monster's uncomfortable demeanor. They could have performed the scene once again. However, this mistake added to the character's allure. Something that could have been a slip turned into a subtle joke that made the monster more relatable and hilarious. The obstinate false leg comes in at number 5. In order to carry out Frankenstein's experiment, Frederick and Igor are meant to unearth a body during one of the grave-robbing sequences. A fictitious leg was rigged to protrude from the ground for a little joke by the prop team. Not too complicated, but the leg refused to comply. Marty Feldman attempted to pull it free, but the object became lodged in the set. Feldman did not deviate from his character. Instead, he gave his all to the task at hand and acted out his struggle, pulling and twisting the leg while making little, spontaneous moans. The man next to him, Gene Wilder, who tried his hardest to maintain a straight face, nearly burst out laughing. Feldman spread the teasing to the obstinate leg. The prop finally broke away in a most spectacular way, sending them both backward onto the mud while the crew erupted in hysterics. In order to add even more comedic fun to Igor's antics, Feldman was encouraged by Mel Brooks to continue playing it awkwardly on the subsequent takes. A straightforward prop malfunction was the first. This ended up being the most iconic example of how young Frankenstein transformed errors into hilarious material. Number 4. The lightning malfunction. The scene in Young Frankenstein where Dr. Frankenstein attempts to call the monster to life is one of the most famous. The laboratory set was replete with sparking coils, vintage-looking machinery, and dramatic lighting that was intended to evoke the era's iconic horror films from the 1930s. However, despite all of those useful consequences, things didn't always happen as planned. Then there was one where the lightning rig simply fizzled while the script called for a dramatic crackle and flash. It flickered and sputtered weakly, barely torchlit, in place of that great, scary bolt. Instead of being a scientific discovery, it appeared to be a broken bulb. Gene Wilder laughed at the abruptness of the anticlimax, as other crew members hurried to find out what went wrong. Marty Feldman, who never misses an occasion to sarcasm, is said to have said something that put the entire set into a frenzy and completely ruined the take. Mel Brooks, on the other hand, had another idea. He considered leaving the footage in place and later added the malfunction concept to heighten the humor of the monster's frantic resuscitation. The intended horror was actually a spoof of failed science experiments, which was exactly the type of comedy that defined the mood of the movie. 3. Elevator shake accident. The enormous laboratory elevator in Young Frankenstein was intended to resemble a scene from an old-fashioned horror film, clumsy, metallic, and slightly menacing. The set piece was everything but stable in practice, though. When Dr. Frankenstein and his helpers were intended to ride the lift smoothly to the next level in one scene, the device started to shake dangerously. Terry Garr, who portrayed Inga, screamed in horror when the platform began to move suddenly. An unscripted and ear-piercing part like that tightened the atmosphere even more. It was not long before the crew realized what had occurred. Furthermore, Marty Feldman and Gene Wilder remained entirely in character rather than cutting. Feldman overacted his actions to make the lift ride feel rough, while Wilder went on as if the entire incident had been scheduled. The rawness of that moment was adored by Mel Brooks, and chose to preserve that spontaneous Gerard moment instead. Character-based humor and slapstick danger turned what could have been a technical failure into comedic gold. Since the lab was supposed to represent the paradox of chaos, parody, and improvisation in the film, the lift shaking incident made it even more appropriate for the kind of unforeseen happenings that viewers would encounter. Secondly, the laughing fits of Wilder and Brooks. If there's one behind-the-scenes tale that embodies the essence of Young Frankenstein, it's Gene Wilder and Mel Brooks' wild bouts of laughter. Brooks and Wilder co-wrote the script, and Wilder was renowned for his passion and dedication to the role. But even he couldn't help but chuckle on this set since the improvisation was so consistent and the comedy so incisive. Later on, Brooks said that the reason why shooting occasionally took twice as long as anticipated was because Wilder was unable to contain his laughter. The clever ad-libs from Feldman were sometimes held responsible. The chain reaction would generally be started by Brooks, but occasionally it would be Peter Boyle's almost perfectly timed grunt. While directing from behind the camera, Brooks would utterly wreck the take by laughing at the performers. Even parts of his laughing spilt into the microphones, forcing the sound engineers to re-record. Rather than handling it as an issue, Brooks made it worse. They had hit comedic gold, he thought, because of the wild laughter. Certainly, he was correct. The outcome was immediately visible on screen when the set reached that high level of energy. There was considerably more to these outbursts of laughter than just chance. In a way, they were the lifeblood of a movie that thrived on happiness, spontaneity, and freedom. Hold on, because our top pick elevates the humor to a whole new level. The unaltered snapshot comes in first. One of young Frankenstein's numerous iconic gaffes sticks out because it is preserved in both the movie and a single image. An photograph of Gene Wilder giggling uncontrollably with Marty Feldman acting out of character next to him has been circulating among fans for years. The image wasn't staged for publicity or altered to look humorous, despite what many people thought. Captured during an outtake, this image is entirely authentic. Moment Wilder stopped being able to control himself. As his dignified doctor, Wilder erupted into actual hysterics after Feldman's ad-lib went astray, prompting him to double over with laughter. The Frankenstein persona vanished. Although the image was intended to be a staged promotional shot, it ended up seeming chaotic. The actors appeared to be enjoying the chaos as much as their audience would later, which is a rare occurrence. Mel Brooks cherished such times. They were representative of the film's theme, in his opinion. Unadulterated improvisation, comedy derived from accidents, and pure slapstick delight. The wild shot serves as a metaphor for the production and demonstrates that, despite apparently filming a serious scene, the cast and crew were laughing uncontrollably behind the black and white spectacle that parodied monsters and insane scientists. Our list of the funniest hidden bloopers from Young Frankenstein is now complete. What made you chuckle the most? Tell us in the space provided below. Please share your favorite with us. Please remember to press the like button. Ring the bell to ensure you never miss a video and subscribe for more behind-the-scenes movie secrets. If you're prepared for even more unexpected mistakes, click the following video that appears on your screen. There's more laughter to come.